at a festival. Listen to his answer when asked about whether he dressed in drag.
Were you ever a drag queen in Brazil?
No, I was not a drag queen in Brazil, guys. I was young and I had fun at a festival. Sue me for having a life.
Well, I mean, you are going to be sued for a variety of other reasons, as it turns out. Apparently, his this story just fell apart on him very, very quickly because there were other people who had seen him dressing in drag fairly routinely. So the list of George Santos' wives is really, really long. Just going to point out one thing. Everybody who is saying that George Santos, there's nothing in politics like this, every single thing that Joe Biden has said about his history is pretty much fake. So I'm just going to point out here, when it comes to politicians lying routinely about who they are and what they do, George Santos, I mean, I guess at least he's not president. It's the best that we can say. This is the Ben Shapiro Show.
Talk Radio 560 KSFO San Francisco to San Mateo, a Cumulus media station.
Classified documents turn up in another top official's home. Until NATO, Fox News. Add former Pence to the list of people turning over sensitive documents.
FBI agents actually came to Pence's Indiana home on the night of January the 19th to retrieve documents that the former VP himself had located a few days earlier, that is, of course, with his attorneys.
Fox's Kevin Cork. Former President Trump also found to have documents at their homes. Cleanup efforts in Texas after severe weather brought significant damage to suburbs outside of Houston.
Officials in Deer Park, Texas, confirming a tornado touched down Tuesday afternoon, leaving in its wake downed power lines and damage to multiple buildings.
The power will be the biggest issue over the next 24 hours of getting that addressed and getting that turned back on.
Deer Park Mayor Jerry Mouton providing an update hours after the tornado struck, urging residents to stay off the roads to allow crews to work on clearing those roads and restoring power. Mouton applauding residents for checking in on each other and thankful that his town has experienced no loss of life from these storms.
Just grateful to God that he was able to protect life in here, and so we'll deal with the property and we will recover and rebuild.
Matt Napolitano, Fox News.
The same storm system moving up from Texas all the way towards Maine. Andrew Moore at the National Weather Service warns of more potential trouble for the Gulf.
We do expect at least a chance for additional tornadoes overnight into the early morning hours.
The risk of twisters may stretch all the way to Florida Wednesday. Skyrocketing egg prices may soon be a federal investigation. Senator Jack Reed calling on the Federal Trade Commission to see why prices have more than doubled since last year. America's listening to Fox News.
From the Fox News Podcast Network, the Fox News Rundown, a contrast of perspectives you won't hear anywhere else. Your daily dose of news twice a day, going far beyond the headlines, tapping into the massive reporting resources of Fox News to provide a full picture of the news of the day.
I'm Dana Perino.
I'm Brett Baer.
I'm Maria Bartiromo.
I'm Brian Kilmeade, and this is the Fox News Rundown.
Subscribe and listen now by going to foxnewspodcast.com or wherever you get your podcasts. From the Fox News Podcast Network.
Hey, it's Will Kane, co-host of Fox and Friends Weekend. Join me as I share my thoughts on a wide range of topics from sports and pop culture to politics and business. With the help of newsmakers and personalities, I will provide you my free, unfiltered, uncancelable opinion on the hottest topics in America.
The Will Kane Podcast. Subscribe and listen now at foxnewspodcast.com or wherever you get your podcasts. America is listening to Fox News.
Lawmakers tackling Ticketmaster with a hearing Tuesday.
This all started to gain a partisan group of senators in mid-November. That's when Ticketmaster's site crashed during a Taylor Swift pre-sale. Thousands of fans lost out on tickets after waiting in an online queue for hours. Ticketmaster blamed it on a bot attack. People who then eventually resell and jack up the price on the secondary market. But senators on both sides of the aisle are buying it. Ticketmaster is the largest ticket seller in the world, which is owned by Live Nation Entertainment. Live Nation puts on a lot of these big name shows, and many people forced to use Ticketmaster out of fear that Live Nation would find a different venue.
Fox's Jeff Paul. The U.S. is expected to announce the Pentagon is sending Abrams tanks to Ukraine, even though they've been saying the tanks are too tough to maintain in a Ukrainian battlefield.
Washington could announce supplying Kyiv with U.S.-made Abrams tanks as early as this week, a U.S. official tells Fox News. 11 months into the war, it's a move that Germany might follow. Russia's warned the equipment would impact Moscow's future relations with Berlin. The need for tanks is most centered around the contested eastern territory of Bakhmut. Civilians there often rely on humanitarian aid to survive. Meanwhile, back in the capital, major personnel turnover as Kyiv attempts to combat high-level corruption allegations. The Zelensky administration dismissed more than a dozen senior officials. At least one is accused of bribery over reconstruction contracts.
That's Fox's Alex Hogan in Kyiv. Palm Beach International Airport in Florida had to be partially evacuated Tuesday night. Police say someone uttered that there was a bomb in his bag. Bomb-sniffing dogs were brought out, but nothing was found. The person who made the threat, arrested by the FBI. Until NATO, this is Fox News.
Securities and advisory services offered through United Planners Financial Services, member FINRA SIPC. All investing involves risk, and there is no guarantee that any strategy will be successful. Don't invest and forget. Powered by Proxy and United Planners are not affiliated.
Join us for this educational and entertaining time with Pat Fatucci as he discusses the importance of having a financial advisor on your team. Don't Invest and Forget, powered by Proxy, has created a new standard of fiduciary service through wealth management, financial planning, insurance solutions, and business owner services. Join one of our live seminars Thursday, February 2nd at Bonvino in Walnut Creek to see how we can help achieve your financial goals. Find out more by visiting our website, don'tinvestandforget.com, or call 88-PLAN-WISE. Again, that's don'tinvestandforget.com or call 888-PLAN-WISE for details.
Show. The Biden administration has hired an obesity expert to help craft new dietary guidelines. This expert says that obesity is a brain disease and there's almost nothing you can do to stop yourself from becoming fat. This is ridiculous, of course, but it's part of a larger and more nefarious agenda, which we will discuss today. Also, the media launches a campaign against assault pistols. What are those exactly? A teen girl is sexually harassed by a man in the women's locker room at the YMCA. Now the harasser is speaking out to defend himself, and somehow I do not find his arguments persuasive. Plus, a famous track star claims racism and sexism after getting kicked off of a plane. Is she really a victim or just another cry bully brat? We'll talk about all that and more today on the Matt Walsh Show. Last week during our mailbag segment, someone asked me to pinpoint the exact moment when the downfall of Western civilization began. Now, my first answer to that question, which may or may not be naively optimistic, is that I'm not ready to admit that the downfall of our civilization has actually happened or is happening. We are fighting to avert such a disaster, and if I didn't believe that we could win that fight, I wouldn't bother with any of this. That said, we are experiencing at the very least a steep decline in nearly all senses of the term. I mentioned that isn't often cited in conversations like these, and that moment occurred in 1952, the publication of what would become the first of so far 5 editions of the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders by the American Psychiatric Association. What made this moment significant in an ominous and very negative sort of way is one step followed by many more increasingly larger and more rapid steps towards the medicalization of the human condition. The psychiatric industry had set out on a path towards diseasifying every human emotion, thought, action, habit, and recasting the human species as pre-programmed and highly defective automatons, incapable of making our own choices or of claiming any sort of responsibility for our own emotional and mental state. By the publication of the DSM-5 in 2013, this process was complete, or perhaps not, because there's always more that can be done after all. There are always more ways to relieve human beings of the burden of their own free will, which has become perhaps the number one mission right now of the medical community. It isn't just psychiatrists anymore who are working diligently on this project. Much of the rest of the medical industry has joined the cause, and this is especially evident in the way that medical experts now approach and treat obesity. And in fact, to bridge the gap between these two topics, we should note that a serious effort was made to add obesity to the DSM-5, officially categorizing it as a mental illness. The kind of thing that you would talk to your psychiatrist about, not a nutritionist, and then be given psychotropic drugs to treat. And by the way, they would be treating, of course, not the obesity, but your feelings about the obesity, which would then actually become disease. The fact that you're obese and don't want to be obese, that's the problem. Let's make you okay with the obesity, and then we solve it. It did end up making it into the DSM-5, but I'm quite sure that's in the DSM. Because we haven't gotten quite to that point. But we have arrived at the point where, as we discussed on the show a few weeks ago, so-called medical experts are officially recommending gastric bypass surgery and diet pills to obese children. Because obesity, they say, is a disease in its own right. Not something that you can or should try to control on your own. It's entirely a disease. The medicalization of gluttony and sloth, which are the true causes of obesity, is now in full swing. One of the people at the forefront of this movement is a woman named Fatima Cody Stanford. She's a doctor at Massachusetts General Hospital, and she also works at Harvard Medical School. Very prestigious profession. She recently added another prestigious title to her resume when she was named as a member on the 2025 Dietary Guidelines Advisory Committee, which is assembled by the Departments of Health and Human Services and Agriculture. This committee, which will hold its first meeting in a few weeks, is responsible for releasing updated dietary guidelines for America, something they've been doing every 5 years since 1980. Now, you may be familiar with their work, because this is the same organization that published the now thoroughly debunked and ridiculed and infamous food pyramid, which was taught as gospel when I was in elementary school. This was just assumed that it was the way to go, and they taught the food pyramid until actual nutrition experts pointed out that the recommendations on the food pyramid were ridiculous and wrong and extremely dangerous to your health. Its biggest problem, there are many problems with the food pyramid, including just how the foods are classified and how overly simple. That the grain industry threw a bunch of money at them, and then they said, you know what? I think grain is great. I think that should be like the only thing people eat. This strategy of recommending that Americans eat whatever type of food has the best lobbying firms behind it apparently didn't have great results for the overall health of Americans. Indeed, as the Dietary Guidelines Advisory Committee continued to work and continued to publish newer and newer guidelines, Americans just continued to get fatter and fatter. There is no evidence that this government initiated anyone, and lots of evidence that it's hurting people, which only means that they'll continue doing exactly what they've always done, and they'll get more and more funding to do it, because that works with the government, as we have seen time and time again. And with Dr. Fatima Cody Stanford as one of the quacks at the helm this time around, there's no reason to think that the results will improve at all. Stanford, a foremost expert on obesity. She teaches the subject at Harvard Medical School. Medical or psychiatric industry can even explain the difference between the two things. They constantly conflate the two, mental disorders and brain diseases. But she insists that diet and exercise have almost nothing to do with making you fit. She made this case a couple of weeks ago to a visibly incredulous journalist on 60 Minutes. Listen to this.
If you diet, you lose weight, right? The number one cause of obesity is genetics. That means if you are born to parents that have obesity, you have a 50 to 25% likelihood of having the disease yourself, even with optimal diet, exercise, sleep management, stress management. So when people see families that have obesity, the assumption is, what are they feeding those kids?
Those are bigoted assumptions. So she proposes that you could have a near perfect diet, you could jog 3 miles a day, you could never touch fast food, you could never touch fried food, you could eat no junk food, everything's great, and you will still have up to an 85% likelihood of being obese because your parents are. You may do everything right and still wake up one morning like Tim Allen in the Santa Claus, suddenly morbidly obese with a white beard and flying reindeer parked in your front yard. That's science, apparently. So despite how she presents it, of course, the reality is that obesity cannot be simply passed down to a child like eye color. It would never be accurate to say, well, I have my mom's eyes, my grandpa's jawline, and my dad's beer gut. If it was that simple, then, if it was simply passed down like brown eyes and pronounced jawlines are passed down, we should see morbid obesity at similar rates across the world and through history, but we don't. We see it here, in this place, at this time in history, because people have never had more food to eat, and they've also never been more sedentary. If we see obesity running in a family, it's not because mom and dad passed down their fat genes, unless by that we mean that a child is so fat that he's literally wearing his dad's pants. No, obesity runs in families because children will generally eat what their parents eat, and they'll follow their parents' example, and they'll sit for 5 hours a day staring at screens if that's what their parents do and allow them to do. And the inherent contradiction here is that, of course, if people like Dr. Stanford are involved in creating any sort of dietary guidelines at all, then they must acknowledge that your diet plays a very important role. What's the point of the dietary guidelines you're working on if the diet doesn't matter? Why would we even be discussing diet if it's just a matter of genetics anyway? It would be like issuing dietary guidelines to help Americans change their blood type. It's a total contradiction. There's no solution to the contradiction. Like so many other contradictions from the so-called expert class, this one is left to just hang out there and hope that none of us will notice. And as for that expert class, it must be said that the laughable claim that obesity running in families is proof of an obesity gene, this is exactly the kind of bad science, the kind of propaganda masquerading as science that has made people totally distrust nearly everyone in nearly every profession related at all to science. We have reached a critical mass, no pun intended, and the public simply cannot endure any more lies from the science and medicine expert class. We can't do that anymore. We can't listen to anymore. And more people are getting to the point where they're saying, I don't want to hear, I don't believe anything you people say. But it's important to realize what this particular lie is meant to accomplish. Indeed, most of the lies from the medical industry have this same goal, and it's the goal I mentioned at the top. The objective is to turn, people into fat, pathetic, helpless, rotund little roly-polies waddling around from place to place, mindless and thoughtless, driven by instinct and easily herded in whatever direction our betters want us to go. They want us to believe that we have no control over our lives, over our minds, over our bodies. Self-affirmation is the highest virtue in our age because self-acceptance is defeat. That's what it is. It is admitting defeat. And they want us defeated and submissive. Simply accept your current mental and physical state, make yourself comfortable with it, satiate yourself, distract yourself, numb yourself by engaging by just watching things on TV and looking at a lot, because you cannot change, and you cannot choose, and you cannot do anything for yourself. That's the message. But of course, if you really don't want to accept it, if there's something about yourself that you really don't like, well, then the next option is to take drugs and get surgery. Because remember, it's all a disease. Whatever it is you don't like about yourself, it's automatically a disease. Well, it's not your fault. Which is why you might as well accept it and even embrace it and be proud of it. Or you could treat it as a disease and go get medicine. Another contradiction. Medicine or surgery is which they'll be side effects for a hefty fee, so that they can be richer and you can be poorer. We're going to add that to it. Poor, fat, helpless, and miserable. That's their vision for you and for me. And a vision that we should all reject. Next up on the Matt Walsh Show, we'll dive into the media's ridiculous reaction